podcast is brought to you by Nearly Media. Are you an entrepreneur or maybe a marketer who wants to grow their business through content production? Maybe you're sick of dealing with agencies or want an outsourced solution that actually fits a budget? Well, Nearly Media, our business, can help you with simple and affordable content production, saving you time and money by taking away that pain of producing the content. If you want to learn more, just head to neurale.com/media, which is neurale.com/media. Play around with our pricing, have a look at all the different options that you have, request or consider requesting a callback from me personally. If you have a friend that runs a business or is a marketer, do send them our way. It will help us keep the lights on and producing more juicy content. Listeners to this show receive a special discount by using the promo code UNCOMMON. If you want to learn yourself as to how to create content, maybe you want to make a podcast or your very own video, just download our free series on how to create a podcast and video at the very bottom of neurale.com/media. Welcome to another episode of Uncommon, the podcast that helps you build your knowledge, skills, and mindset through interviews with unique individuals. My name's Jordan Michaelides, and I'm your host. In this episode, I have for you Courtney Carthy. Courtney is the founder of the Inflatable Regatta and Nearly Media, a podcast network that works with brands. A former journalist who's worked at the ABC, Triple J, and SYN, Courtney has a natural penchant for the audio format, with his podcast work at the ABC leading to what we know now as Nearly Media. Nearly Media is one of the clear leaders in the new and emerging space of podcasts in Australia, like our former guest Claire Tonti, who's the CEO of Planet Broadcasting. I just really wanted to get the opportunity to pick Courtney's brain, I guess, understanding where he believes the industry will be going, what makes a brilliant podcast, and what Nearly is doing and has done in the past. So a very, very enjoyable episode if you like this sort of thing and if you want to get to understand this format better. We spoke about a lot of different things, particularly as well his Inflatable Regatta, which is very, very interesting. We spoke about why he got into media, Nearly Media, of course, the iTunes algorithm, his strategy for 2019 and beyond, the potential for branded podcasts, and then commonalities in both good content and marketing as well. If you enjoy this episode, do subscribe on your podcast app, or if you like this episode, consider leaving us and other listeners a review. For all the show notes and all previous guests, you can head to neurale.com/podcast. That's neurale.com/podcast. Thank you so much all for listening, our regulars for coming back, our newbies for giving us a shot. I hope you all enjoy this conversation with Courtney Carthy. Courtney, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I had many questions to kick things off and ask you with. I think James Cridlin was taking the piss by asking, is Courtney a girl's name? I get the sense that he loves to do that a bit through some of the conversations in the Oz podcast group. But I think importantly, and we were just chatting about this beforehand, was the river regatta.
Oh, Inflatable Regatta.
The Inflatable Regatta.
Yep.
What can you tell the audience about this?
So it is something that we did back in 2006. The short version of it is you get the cheapest, crappiest inflatable boats you can that are up to Australian standards, some friends and some beer, and you get on the river here in Melbourne. Very few people use the river in Melbourne. So
yeah, well, it's
a bit of a wasteland sometimes.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's maybe the brown murkiness of it? It's not very attractive to look at, or?
There's the stigma of that. And when I was in high school or primary school growing up around the river, there'd always be stories that a body was found down near Hawthorne or, wherever. But not far from where we are at the moment is the Spencer Street Bridge. And that has a clearance of only at high tide, like 80 centimetres. So no boats or anything can get under there.
So where is the Spencer Street Bridge?
Spencer Street down near Crown Casino.
Really? Only 80 centimetres?
At high tide. So the Yarra is a tidal river. So as the tide comes up, it pushes the water, it lifts the level of the river up. And that's why you can get dolphins or saltwater fish up, like a kilometre up the river, because there's a saltwater wedge that's underneath.
Wow.
Anyway, that's the Spencer Street Bridge cuts off access to a whole lot of people, a whole lot of boats, which is why you've got the Docklands Marina and the marinas around in the bay rather than up the Yarra.
Yeah.
And the only people that can get up are the boats that are effectively already under there or that can fit under the bridge, and that's at low tide, which might be maybe 2 meters. And if you're ever standing on a boat, you can hit 2 meters pretty quick.
Yeah.
So further up the river, you've got rowing clubs, which really dominate the sort of power sort of trinity of the river.
Well, I used to do rowing. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
they absolutely dominate.
They can muscle anybody off the river, just about. And so we tried doing this with inflatable boats in 2008, and we were on the river for maybe 5 hours. It was pretty good. And then just put it down to that was fun. I mean, we chose inflatable boats because we were at uni and didn't have any money, and thought, that'd be a great thing to do. Something different, something better than going to a bar and just getting hammered.
And what day was it? The first original regatta?
Oh, I don't know. It was summery. It might have been late spring, early autumn.
Okay.
But we were still on the river when it was dark.
I know. I remember, as I was saying before, your mate Matt from the 1,000 Coffees, who I've just learnt is a North Korean tour guide as well.
Yes.
Had that original post, and he was saying something like, you guys refused to give up and get off the river, and in exchange with your parents, you were willing to get off the inflatable rafts for McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah, that's this is the most embarrassing part about the first inflatable regatta. We refused to get off, stayed on. My parents came driving around looking for us at 11 o'clock at night. That's how late it was when we got off. And they had plotted our course from when they saw us to when they knew we started, and had picked us up at Burnley. And then we were paddling along in the dark, and we hear my mum going, Court! Hi, Mum. Out with my friends, don't embarrass me. And I think I must have been about 22 or 25 or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they suggested that we get out, offered to buy us all McDonald's. We all got out pretty quickly, and then went home after that.
And where would it start? Where does it start and where does it end?
Now it starts at Bridge Road and finishes near Scotch College, which is sort of Glen Ferry and Riversdale Road, about 2 kilometres down the river, but not straight. The river bends around heaps.
Yeah. So you're away from the main thoroughfares, basically. All the rowing clubs are way back down near Swanson Street and whatnot.
The private school rowing clubs like Wrighton or Scotch, St Kevin's, Xavier. We launched from Xavier's rowing club. They're hanging around Wesley. They've got a terrible habit of cutting straight through our little regatta, and they get stuck in the way, and we have, yelling matches with them and file complaints and, threaten to leak stuff to newspapers and that sort of thing over email. So that's pretty good.
That's one way to get a private school to shut up.
Yeah.
Tell them you go to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, that is so funny. I was just thinking about your earlier career and your earlier life. Did you grow up in New Zealand?
I was born in New Zealand.
Right.
So when I was about 18 months, I was born on a farm in Hamilton.
Okay.
Near where Tony Martin, the comedian, same sort of province, or they don't have states in New Zealand. They've just got sort of areas. He was in Waikato too. And then my parents, we lost a whole bunch of money and had to sell the farm because we planted onions or some crop that just didn't get bought that year. My uncle was living in Richmond, or technically Cremorne at the time, and my parents flew over, were like, fuck it, let's do it. So we moved over here, and I think our first house was in Richmond near the London Tavern on Lennox Street.
Okay.
Richmond,
Right.
yeah. And that would have been 1987.
And what did your parents do after that?
My father was an accountant and mum was a teacher. So, but she had 2 young kids. So still maternity stuff. But she went to work at Swinburne University, I think,
Okay.
pretty soon after, or she did a master's or something.
And then your dad obviously would have gotten a job in the accounting space.
Yeah. He was
interesting.
working on South Bank when it was built. He was in one of the first office buildings there because that was in the early 90s.
Right. Why did they start a farm? Is that just like something that
They'd
existed in the
retired.
family? Oh, really?
They'd retired. They'd made money in New Zealand enough to retire. My dad was 40 and my mum was 32.
Wow. Jeez.
And they'd retired. They retired to a farm and then decided to start farming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, farming is not one way to make money.
Not in this climate.
No, not in this climate at all.
I heard about there's a film called The Dry, which is a book, but the film has got Eric Bana in it, and it's being filmed out near in the Wimmera, and it's about a crime that happens during a drought. And I was talking to somebody who had been out there and visited just last night. And he was like, well, coincidentally, there's a drought going on right now. And I'm like, you don't have to wait very long before another drought comes along. And they're always, another 100-year drought or
it's always
50-year drought.
Setting records.
Yeah, totally.
Going back to just your parents for a moment, I'm curious, as you've grown up, has there been, or what lesson has stuck with you maybe directly or indirectly from them at all?
Mum's lesson was be happy and work for the ABC, which I did for a while.
Seems very specific.
Yeah.
Just have that banner at the top of your bedroom.
that was really quite close to it. Dad's, I don't know, I stopped seeing my dad when I was 15. We agreed not to see each other. We had a falling out, so I haven't spoken to him since.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that's 20 years next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
So not really many lessons there.
Why do you think your mum was so fascinated with the ABC?
Oh, she did a cadetship with the New Zealand equivalent of the ABC and decided she didn't want to be a journalist. She wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
But she very much likes writing and media and all that sort of stuff. So, there was sort of a natural fit there. Plus, family's a bit of a socialist family. So,
yeah.
you're not really going to get inspired by Rupert Murdoch if you're my mum.
Definitely not. Would it be funny if she did, though?
Oh, yeah. I hate his values, but he's just such a nice man.
Yeah, he's a great operator. Oh, really, Mum? Oh, that's so good. That makes me wonder then, like, why do you think, like, what was the archetype you were thinking about when it came to journalism and the media? Like, why get into media at all?
Pretty much one of the main reasons was it gave me access to things I didn't know sort of what I was really interested in. So if you get to go and just like ring up and say, hi, I'm from the ABC, you can call anybody and say, hey, I'm from the ABC, and 9 times out of 10, they'll talk to you or let you in or like say that you can come and visit them, and then you can poke around and tell other people about it. Like that skill and access, or sorry, not skill, that brand and the access that the brand gives you is incredible.
Yeah.
So when we started doing Inflatable Regatta and had a company set up for Inflatable Regatta, I had this I'd been working at the ABC for maybe 7 years, and I had this confusing, utterly confusing experience. I'd start work at midday at the ABC.
Okay.
And I'd leave my house at 10 to start walking to work, which would only take me half an hour, but I'd loop around, wander around and make all my phone calls for Inflatable Regatta while I'm walking to work, because, it's exercise, plus you're sort of out, you can write down things if you really have to. But
yeah, it's a great idea.
It worked, but I would spend most of that time telling people and selling people on the idea and the brand of Inflatable Regatta, and then get to the ABC and just pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, I'm from the ABC. My name's Courtney." I'd be like, "Yes, what would you like?" After this shit fight in the morning of, "Hi, I'm from Inflatable Regatta. No, it's not a race. It's this boating event that we do on the Yarra. And no, it is really happening. Have a look at our website. Can I send you an email?" Like, and just hammering down the door, which I really hadn't had to do before because I was straight out of uni into the ABC. You just immediately have all this access. So it's this expectation.
Yeah.
And the same thing came with Nearly Media, where you sort of effectively are the brand, you know, or like the only one in the world pushing that brand directly. Of course, nobody's going to hear about it or know about it or care about it or give a fuck what you're talking about or how you might be able to help them or, you know, something similar. So having to go through that experience for first and second time is sort of quite, I don't know, a little bit sort of builds the resilience in you, because for every, 10 phone calls, one might be half good. Sometimes they're all good. Sometimes they're all bad.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about, your career when I was looking at it. You worked as a reporter for, is it pronounced Sin or SYN?
Sin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
Sin. I remember back in my uni days hearing about this radio station and having a look at it every now and then. But obviously from there you worked as a producer, many different shows at the ABC. So there was a conversation hour, Drive with Raf, and I think for a small period of time you filled in on Hack as well.
Yeah, I got a month on Hack. That was great. If anybody wants to see the story about how my wife and I met and got engaged,
that's right.
That's still available there. Frances Abbott got married within 2 weeks of, engaged within 2 weeks of meeting her partner.
And you did as well.
I 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Actually,
still, it's a bloody short. Like, if you compare you guys versus me and my partner, she wouldn't start dating me for 3. So for 3 months, I was like pursuing her, and okay, we'll just hang out as friends. And now we've been together for 10 years, and then I proposed.
Good on you for getting there.
Yeah, it's a long bloody. It's a long fucking time. Do you want to maybe just? I can't summarize the entire story, but I think if you just give our listeners an idea of what happened there, I think that'd be quite intriguing. We'll make sure we link that as well.
So I'd broken up with a girl the previous December, had been on a bender until February. I'd been judging raw comedy on Brunswick Street, and then had organised to go and meet my now wife, Bronwyn, which, funnily enough, how her name's spelt is the male version in Welsh. So I've got the female name and she's got the male name. If we ever go to Wales, it'll be hilarious. And then, met her on Valentine's Day. Neither of us knew it was Valentine's Day. I was that hungover that I got vertigo on our first date.
Wow.
And then I stuck around, but
That's intense.
Yeah, it sucked. It sucked. I brought, I think, a couple of bottles of cider and some pineapple licorice, and that was it. And then we just saw each other sort of repeatedly over the next couple of weeks. And then after we'd been out, we were having drinks on a Sunday, and then one thing led to another. Have you ever thought about getting married? Oh, I've always thought that I would get married. Me too. I thought I might get married to you. Oh, because I've been thinking about that as well. And then we both sort of did the official, will you marry me, just because I thought I had to. And then we both called our mum. My mum said, okay, Court, it sounds like you've had a drink. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And her mum said, does he want to marry you?
Wow.
And then, I think a year and a half later, we got married.
Wow.
So we're engaged we didn't tell anybody for months.
Wow.
But that was March 15, 2015. Yeah, because we got married in 2016.
It's funny though, because if you look back maybe 50 years, 60 years, the time of relationship and engagement was that quick. It was not,
Well, if you,
the tradition.
Yeah. And matchmaking, working that up, behind the scenes, probably more effort goes into it. But here is your husband in India, here is your wife.
I'm even thinking about my grandparents. So
oh, really?
Yeah, my grandfather was Greek, but he came here as an immigrant, and he met my grandmother, who was just, Anglo-Saxon. They met at a dance in St Kilda because he was living around, he'd immigrated to St Kilda. They started having dates, I guess you'd call it, and then she introduced him to her dad, and they were both printers, so they got along pretty well because he was a very talented printer.
Yeah.
And not long after that, I'm pretty sure he proposed to her and did the whole, like, back then they would have, particularly for Greek Cypriots, they'd have this sort of dowry ceremony, but it's really just his mother would come in and they'd have fruit, and it would just be like this whole traditional, like, you're getting married to them type thing. There's no handing over of money or any shit like that. But I think if I think about the time, it would have definitely been under 3 to 4 months.
Wow.
But that was how people. It's the same thing for my mother's parents. Like they met, and a few months later they're engaged, and then probably a year later they were married.
Yeah, they were probably half the age I was when I got engaged as well.
Well, that's the thing as well, is a lot of people got engaged back at 22, 23, I think.
Yeah. Well, life expectancy wasn't like it is now.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that...
Travel was more expensive, so you couldn't get caught up overseas.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about that recently because grandmother that I was just referencing recently passed away, and we were just thinking about, like, when I grew up, did you ever meet any of your great-grandparents?
No.
Really?
No, not at all.
I think I've been very, very lucky.
2 grandparents.
I met 2 great-grandparents.
Wow.
And they were alive for a long time, like until I was 11, 12. So, and then my grandmother lived to 88, and she met probably 10 different great-grandchildren.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot, huh?
Wow. Imagine what it would feel like being the great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
With these, 4 generations just hanging around.
It's weird. It would be weird. Yeah, I think there's I recently did a DNA test. I think there's a genetic thing there with how long people last in our family. Because it's I had these 5 different markers for this longevity gene. But yeah, we were just talking about that recently. It's
Was that like a 23andMe or Ancestry?
It is 23andMe. So there is some variability in the tests as well.
Aren't you worried that they're going to take your DNA and give it to...
Probably. I mean, it's like being... I could be worried about anything. I could be worried... I've got hereditary high cholesterol. I could worry that I'm going to die, drop dead tomorrow, but there's no point worrying about it.
They've got a butter for that though now.
Yeah. Well, the key to that is actually just eating better. There's so much shit in our diet these days.
So how long what else did you find out from the 23andMe
it's
test?
just sort of stuff that I already knew anyway. It's mainly dietary things. The tricky part is taking the data. So what happens is you get the data, and for people who are unaware, you've got your chromosomes, but all your chromosomes have alleles. These are the things that are at the end, or they're sort of the end of your DNA. Imagine like a strand of something, and it's just at the very end. And that really is like the recipe for you, or these polymorphisms are the recipe for you. So for example, I might be bad at processing cholesterol, but you might be good at processing cholesterol. And so that makes us, so to speak. And you get the DNA, so you get the raw data. You can go to something like an SNpedia, which is like a thing that matches all the different tests around the globe and the relevance of those tests to your actual DNA. So it might be like a test that said, the person with this gene and this allele has this problem or is good at doing this thing, and so it matches it to that test. And then the prevalence of the test is based on like were there 50 people in it, were there 10,000 people in it, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
And so you get these databases. Like a good one is called Found My Fitness, and she, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, her name is. So she does a lot of research around longevity and health and all that sort of stuff. And she's originally like a researcher around cancer. And how metabolism affects cancer. And she basically created like a system that does a comprehensive report specific to lipids and carbohydrates and proteins. So just those things, it's very succinct, but other stuff it's not going to be, there's not much there. And it just tells you like, this is very prominent. And then sometimes you get some things reoccurring, like for myself, like the longevity thing, or like I'm really not good at processing saturated fat. It actually bumps up my blood glucose as well. So yeah, it's interesting more than anything. And I think the most valuable element is, discovering things with your family. Like, I got both my parents to do it. And again, they had the same concerns, like, oh, is it going to be hacked? It's like, you're not that important. Someone's not going to use it.
Well, best case scenario, you end up in big data somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
You're on a data set.
What's big data? So what was interesting is just seeing like where sort of like your so like you have these family trees of genes that stem from different places. So my dad's obviously Greek Cypriot, my mum's sort of Anglo-Saxon. Her genes or her haplogroup stem from basically northern Europe basically. Although her family's from like Ireland and northern UK, it sort of gives you a sense that basically they were raped and pillaged. That whole region was raped and pillaged by Vikings, and therefore they have that DNA. And so you learn about that haplogroup and who were these people that existed 20, 30,000 years ago. And it's interesting. And then on dad's side, it's like his family's from the Caucasus and how they migrated to, Cyprus and all that sort of shit. And it's just fun to learn, I guess.
Wow.
Because I'm obsessed with history and I love that sort of stuff.
Is there
then you can see hereditary things as well, like genes that both your parents have and that you have. And
so did you find out that you were more your mother's son than your father's?
I basically look like my father, but it seems like I've got a lot of the genetics of my mother. Yeah.
That's nice how both of you got a part of me.
Yeah, exactly. My partner was joking about that the other day, but it's interesting to see that. Like, you're right, I've got a lot of hereditary things from my mum's side, but then I do have some things from my dad's side.
Yeah.
I've so many people. I had one of my best mates was like, "Oh, aren't you worried? Like, what is with 23andMe? What's going to happen to the data? Blah blah blah." And I just think that for a start, your data is never. I've learned this through working at companies like CoinJar. Your data is never safe. My personal opinion is the data is safer with some sort of authority, like a CoinJar or a 23andMe, than you, because you are so infallible as a human being for being hacked. And I've seen that firsthand through working in the cryptocurrency space. All of the issues that people have are created based on them falling for a phishing attack, some sort of DDoS attack, something that basically hijacks their confirmation biases in some way. Wow. Whereas when you have a third party in the middle, the issues just go down to nothing, basically.
I heard that
becomes
the
a
other
rounding
day,
error.
1/3 of crypto exchanges have been hacked in the last 5 years or something.
Yeah, and they're probably terrible organizations. Yeah, I've got no doubt about that. But I would feel more confident with my money at CoinJar than I would at NAB, knowing the security structures now. And I used to be totally on the other side. I used to believe that not your keys, not your money. I'd prefer to hold it in like a cold wallet myself.
Yeah.
But after seeing some things, particularly when you hear like these cases on Reddit.
Can you give us an example?
Well, a good example was recently people would buy cold wallets from eBay. And what happened was
they look like a USB stick.
Yeah.
Don't they?
So for reference, I think our audience knows pretty well about cryptocurrencies now, but
sorry if we're going over something you already know.
That's fine. There'll be people listening that don't know. But basically, when you buy cryptocurrencies, you got a hot wallet and a cold wallet. Hot is connected to a network of some kind, whether it's a LAN or the internet, and a cold wallet is like a device that can only be accessed on that device. So typically, they're like USBs loaded with sort of a minor operating system that gives you some user interface. So for the users at home, you'd grab that, you put it into your computer, it's got an address, you send it from CoinJar address to that address, and then it sits in your wallet. So it's like having it on a USB stick. The case that I saw recently was a really, really well-known manufacturer who always says buy direct from the manufacturer. Someone had bought these sticks, preloaded them with another piece of software that would automatically reroute from the address that you put it into about an hour after the fact to their address, which would then reroute to another address, and then it was, you have no idea where it's gone. Until you can find out who owns that wallet, there's no way to track it down. So what happened was they were buying it from eBay, from some seller on eBay. They would put it in and like $20,000 just gone. And it was so sad because, this guy, he was like, yeah, I'm so confident. I've put it on the cold wallet. I've got it in a safe. He's had it sitting there for 3 months. He comes back and he looks at it and there's nothing there, and he couldn't believe it. And he was trying to work out. He couldn't contact the seller. The seller's account had been shut down. And then he realized that there was an automatic, route out of his wallet about 3 hours after he'd done it. So what I think about is like the recourse that I have. What legal recourse do you have in certain situations? And I think, particularly with what's going to happen with these data, like these data obligations from GDPR, it's going to become a liability, and it's going to become like companies going to take out insurance on it. That's
only if they're found and if they're operating in Europe, though. So there's a few things. There's always the places that you might be giving your data over to can just be a conduit, like the cold storage that just reroute it to something that's like an operator that's reasonably nefarious. So you can you trust the institution, sure, but if the institution has a back door that's not, like, even governments, you can't completely trust them with your data. There's have I been pwned.com. I put in my email address if I want to feel depressed there. Yeah. And it just shows me all the times that I have been, hacked. And I'm not great at using passwords. So, I mean...
What's that address?
Don't write that down. Oh, have I been pwned?
Okay. PWN...
pwned.com. An Australian guy set it up.
Yeah.
And now he's sort of like the go-to place. So he'll... be alerted, instead of having a reminder set with some sort of script, he'll be alerted that there's a new data set out there. He'll go through it, map it out, and then you can just type in your email address and it'll say, yep, you got nabbed back in 2014 when PlayStation lost half their database to hackers.
Wow.
Here.
Wow.
It's an amazing service. Doesn't do anything for you other than let you know that you
have.
Yeah.
It makes you pissed.
Yeah, it makes you really pissed. It can also remind you to change your passwords.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's worth donating $5 to the guy because he does a really good job of it, and it's just something he does on the side.
Yeah, and that's actually the same thing with the Rhonda Patrick stuff, with the data analysis that she does. It's sort of like a $10 donation if you want to do it, but that's like she's got a minimum donation to use it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a tricky one, that all that data stuff.
There's a great episode of Reply All. I think it's called The Snapchat Thief.
Yeah, I remember hearing this.
That's worth going to listen to if you're looking for something that just puts how insecure your phone is in perspective.
We're completely insecure on everything. I think cybersecurity is going to be the most interesting frontier for the next 10 to 15 years in computing.
Hot job, hot employment sort of circumstance at the moment, apparently. If you're getting into IT, go to cybersecurity.
Here. You can be a network systems operator, or you can become a white hat hacker, and the difference in job pay is like almost $100,000. It's something ridiculous like that.
Jeez.
But it's not surprising because there's so much infallibility just in humans, but also in our systems.
Plus, the white hat hackers can trade on fear just as much as the black hat hackers.
Exactly. I want to jump to Nearly Media. Mm-hmm. So we've gotten a sense of your early career, and I get this sense now, just the way that we're talking about these things. You're a naturally curious individual, and I guess I'm fascinated by how you decided, all right, I'm doing this stuff at the ABC, these podcasts as a development producer. Why go do it on your own?
Because I had to go back to my old job at the ABC and I didn't want to do that. And we just finished, we were about to do Inflatable Regatta, so I needed some time off to do that, which is like a month or two in the second year. And then I got a few $1,000s out of Inflatable Regatta that kept me going. and set up Nearly Media with a friend who he got a job pretty quickly after we set it up, so it ended up being just me.
Wow.
But the office was paid for through Inflatable Regatta for a few more months.
Okay.
And we would meet up each Friday for like 4 years. We did this and talk about stuff, and one of those things would be podcast ideas.
Okay.
So between 2013 and 2017, we were just like at the Malt House on Friday drinking beers, saying, what about this for a podcast idea? What about this for a podcast idea? We should do a podcast that has this. We should do a podcast that has that. And then, also talking about other things, of course. But
Okay.
he had a job at the ABC, and then I was leaving job at the ABC, and I thought, fuck it, I can set this up. And we had the business model was so naive. It was that we would make our own shows, and then eventually they would make money because they'd become, really successful, and we'd make them all ourselves, and it'd be easy. That'd be fine. But the way that we would do it is do branded shows first. So like the opposite of the Gimlet model, which was,
the inverse. Yeah.
Yep. And so we thought that businesses would want a weekly podcast, and we would go to their office and set up the podcast studio. They'd do their thing, and then we'd pack it down, take it back to the office, edit it, send it back to them, or publish it and just let them know that it was out there and help them with all the stuff. And, we'd do that 5 or 6 or maybe 10 times a week at $500 a pop for each episode. And then we're like, wow, 5 times 10 is 5,000, and then it might cost us like a little bit for equipment. So like we could be making $2,000 a week each pretty quickly.
It's so naive. The funniest thing about that is that what often happens, because marketing teams have fixed budgets.
Yeah.
They can't commit to something ongoing.
Nah.
So they have to have like a defined project. And yeah, I've felt the same thing. You go to them and they're like, I just can't do it weekly, but maybe we could do a trial.
Yeah, let's do 6 episodes.
And so, seasons is so funny. I had that same thing, even though I saw, even with Gimlet stuff, that they would have it based on seasons. And what do you find is like the classic number of episodes per season? Is it 5?
Oh, no,
6
it's always 6, yeah.
Always 6?
People have tried to do 4. One company...
Why 6?
I don't know. 6 is traditionally the amount of the number of episodes in a British TV season.
Oh, okay.
I think it's 12 or 22, or no, 8 or 22, I think, for an American one, but it's 6 or 12 for an English one.
Right.
So like it doesn't seem like it, but the English Office is all in season runs of 6.
Wow.
But the American one runs in like 21, 22, and they've got like 8 seasons of that. But that's so much more common. And the sort of hard time, to go back to us bringing in a kit and setting it up and thinking that's our business model, we actually had an early sort of like customer that wanted exactly that.
Okay.
So we're like, it's proven. We just need to get like another 5 customers. Anyway, they were a startup VR company. So they had, were making this product and they're waiting to ship it, waiting for it to be finished. And anyway, they were about to ship it. So they cut their whole development team. They just left the 2 founders there to do the sales because they had the product now, and then cut out the podcast and any other spending. And so we only made 2 episodes for them.
God.
But put a whole lot of effort into those 2 episodes, much more than they paid us.
Yeah.
Anyway, since then, we've had the only ongoing work that we've had that's branded has been repeat seasons, but we're doing an internal podcast at the moment that is relatively ongoing. But another big company that we're working with, they do monthly episodes. So then they'll be going for about 9 or 10 months by the time they publish the ones that we have planned for them.
Okay.
But monthly episodes, I'm not a fan of that. So,
yeah.
it's their prerogative. We're in the background.
Yeah, the algorithm doesn't really suit that. I mean, it's a good way to get punished by iTunes. You've just got to be consistent, don't you?
Yeah.
At least on a weekly basis. That's why the seasons work, because then you can at least drip feed it or publish it all.
I don't know whether or not the algorithm like powers you down after a while. So if you haven't published in a while, does it go like, and then you've got to like ramp it back up again?
I think it depends. Like I've noticed if we delay, like let's say we normally publish on a Tuesday, the audio and the video on the Wednesday, on the Thursday, but that's on YouTube, so it doesn't really matter. But if we publish the audio on like a Wednesday, particularly if it's like a late Wednesday, we just notice our downloads drop off. Now, it could be related to the person's episode, but I've just noticed like there's less momentum in that week, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
I don't, and it's only a small difference, like by basically 12 to 18 hours. But I have noticed that, like you have your week and it'll be slightly going up as we have over the last 2 years, and then all of a sudden it'll just come down because we've published late. And I feel like it's like you publish an episode and you get this momentum for a week and it comes up and it starts coming down a bit. And then you add your second episode and they sort of cross over. And, if you've had two really good episodes, you get a booster.
Yep.
But it's sort of just like it gets like its peak and then it comes down.
That would be a really good layered graph for any podcast hosting services and analytics services. So it would overlay with some sort of transparency the what's it called, the download rate over a period of time.
Yeah.
Number of downloads on the Y and time on the X.
Yeah.
So that you could see like, publish and then it goes down like a triangle, publish and then down, and you have a series of triangles along. And then you could see which ones really had a lasting impact because of the name or whoever or the time you published.
That would be really good, wouldn't it?
I'm going to suggest that to Anchor and get some shares and go back in time.
Because what would you do that? It's like time, but like segmented time on the bottom.
Yeah, well, you just break it down into...
Because some would be like, they'd really... some episodes really talent. Like your first episode...
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? Your number one episode always has the most... Not the most, but in comparison to the ones in between...
Yep.
Has an insane amount of downloads.
I think it's people going back to the start. Being like, I enjoyed this. Let's go back and...
Let's see what it's like.
Yeah, see it from the beginning.
Because our first episode has more downloads than any other episode. Which I find interesting. But the most popular episodes on iTunes are 2 middle episodes, which they're close by in terms of downloads, but I don't know how that fucking iTunes thing makes sense.
I don't think it does. Actually, James Cridlin with your boy's name, if you're listening, write in, let us know
how it works. Yes. I should have him in, shouldn't I? Is he in Melbourne?
He's in Brisbane, but he comes down to Melbourne.
Okay, I'll have to message him when he's in and just talk about some more specifics around analytics and news and all that sort of shit.
He's better than anybody I've ever heard of.
Yeah,
on this sort of thing.
He's very, very good.
It is totally frustrating though, and we've got into the habit of publishing as much as we can on the weekend. So as much as we can on Sunday.
Why is that?
Schedule things. Because more people tend to download stuff on Sunday than other days. So I personally think it's because people are at home and they're on their Wi-Fi, and that's when your phone will automatically download it, or they're, racking up their listening habits for the week and downloading it on their Wi-Fi at home so they don't get stung for the data while they're on the train.
How did you work out, though, that the Sunday was the day? Like, did you look at some form of analytics or?
What did I do? I saw a report somewhere. I can't remember where, but Sunday and Monday are like number one days to do it. And even if you go by maybe your personal experience anecdotally, think about what shows publish on a Sunday or Monday. There are barely any. Most of them publish Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
So you're
competing,
competing on a there's like 6 or 20 shows competing for one person's attention within 50% of the space or 50% of the time frame that they can publish. So if you get yourself into the other side, other 50%, when maybe there's only 2 to compete with, you're more likely to get that download.
Yeah, and also people are more likely to be on social media for your distribution when you're talking about the release of an episode. I find that people are more likely to be on social media on the weekend because, they're either bored or they're communicating about what they're doing or they've got some downtime. I just know that from my own personal habits, I'll be more on social media on a weekend, even though I try and restrict it, more on a weekend than I am midweek because I'm just so busy.
Well, there's that hangover scroll that people do on the couch. It's just one finger just dragging it down, watching this.
So you basically did the reverse gimlet, just going back to that. So the idea was, all right, I'm going to launch with this. You worked out pretty soon, like ourselves, it's not the be-all and end-all. When did you've got a few shows here. I just want to read out some of them. The Debrief with Dave O'Neill, which is great. I'd recommend people listen to that. But I've actually started to really enjoy Somehow Related because I just love Glenn Robbins.
Yep.
Great show. You've done some branded stuff, as you said. Scale Up is one. Holiday Wine Companion. I quite enjoyed that.
Oh, really?
Through Langton's.
Great.
I was trying to be a sommelier when I was at university, and he was like my idol. So
cool.
I found that quite interesting. So I'm just curious, how has sort of the business model changed now? Is it all just going for ads with original content? What's the mindset here now?
The strategy for 2019 and beyond is with our network, we don't own all of our content. The creators own the content because we're not employing them. We produce them, so we have some sort of ownership over, different aspects of it. But the core content, we can't just go and sell off Somehow Related if we want to and then say, Glenn, Dave, you're working over here now.
Yeah.
And, here's the person that's going to look after you.
Yeah.
So we're going to create more shows that we own. So like Chapter 1, which we launched recently, which is out now. And then continue like sort of more passive branded work unless, specific sort of high value, high creative work comes along. So there's a reasonable market out there for behind the scenes stuff. So developing the creative, like assessing or doing the, pre-production and some of the post-production, but much less of the editorial work. So, we wouldn't, less and less we're deciding which grab goes where, and which, why, which bit should be cut out of this conversation. We're saying to clients, you take care of that because you know what you want to produce and what the thing will make it sound as good as possible and get paid for it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And do you find which do you think has the most momentum for you guys at the moment? Is it that network related work or is it the branded stuff?
Not at all branded stuff. Financially branded stuff, 100%.
Really?
The market's too small in Australia unless you're in the top 1% sort of echelon. And particularly what brands often misunderstand but also have a head start on is that podcasts start from an audience of zero. You start a new feed, you've got nobody on that feed, which is something that really pisses me off, where people will create a show, this highly specific, beautiful show, they'll do it, and then the same brand will turn around like a minute later and be like, we want to do a second season, this is great. And then fire up some brand new RSS feed when they've got a perfectly good RSS feed with people that are familiar with the brand, that know what's going on, that can simply be told like, this is the next season. This is what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
You're going to get this for free.
Yeah.
From us. You made it through the first season. You must have enjoyed that. Let's go again. But it's going to, it's not, the entree is not going to be the same as the main or, whatever.
Yeah.
And I see brands and podcast production companies doing that and just burning feeds. They just sit out there and languish and cost them, hosting money.
Yeah. I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what podcasts are. I still don't think that companies really get, or at least marketers really fully get the potential of it, what they can do with it.
Absolutely not. And this is something, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Where I'm really sort of like, I used to think this was a big secret, but it's not. It should just be something that people understand about the medium, is that it's a channel. So whatever you put on that channel, like you wouldn't do a social media campaign and start up a brand new page and then, burn that page and then have it sitting there and then go and start up another one with your brand name all over it.
Yeah.
Why not treat it as a channel, load it up with the content and, and push it out through that channel as necessary. But instead of getting people to move over to another channel, like just keep a sort of like singular focus. Having 5 Twitter accounts for one company is a little bit insane. Yeah, unless there's, definitive reason for it. And a diversity of content isn't a definitive reason to have, a diversity of RSS feeds for podcasts. Plus, I mean, this is another thing that we talk to brands about, is that the podcast is such a heavy, rich content generator. So you and I are talking now. You've got paper in front of you because you've done research so that we could have a, make the most of the conversation. We've got video cameras. We could have stills cameras here as well. We can transcribe this interview, pick out quotes and use them on press releases or in a story that might, go on the Inflatable Regatta webpage.
Yeah.
All of that sort of stuff. And then the artwork that runs between both of us, we've got enough artwork to, fill 15, 20 blogs. There's so much content there that I used to say the first person that we would hire is just somebody that can get that content and repurpose it, disseminate it, find the value in it, and then post it and, sort of crank up some sort of, enthusiasm to be getting it out there. And so it's diversified rather than the podcast content only lives on the podcast, which is just such a waste in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I've been speaking to a lot of brands and also internally at CoinJar about that, having your sort of Gary groundwork of content, that base of the pyramid, which then disseminates into, like you said, a blog post, a video, a still image with, some sort of essay type caption. A GIF. There's so many things that you can do with it. And you put in an hour and then there's possibly 20 different things that you could do with that hour of content. So, So you think that is if you were to think about the number one mistake that brands make, it is possibly that? Yeah,
not valuing what content can be extracted from, seemingly sort of single medium. I think it was Dave O'Neill went over to, or maybe I heard it from somebody else, but they were in America or the UK, and it was an American sort of touring. And even heard a similar story of Americans coming here where they'll do podcasts and they'll be like, where are the video cameras? Because they're so used to everybody videoing their stuff over there. And I think one of the questions that came up on the Facebook group, Australian Podcasters, that was posed to me through the question that you asked is how far behind is Australia compared to America?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, years behind, because it'll be years before people in Australia are doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And having a video camera set up, with lights in a sort of professional setting so that all that content can be captured at once without having to, we're going to do a video today. Let's go out and do a video. So then we've got 90-second video after 8 hours of work. And, we better do the podcast. Well, let's set that for next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we'll sit down and we'll plan that. And then, we're going to do a photo shoot. We'll do the photo shoot after the podcast. So that'll be Thursday. And then on Friday, let's write down the transcription. You don't need to do that. And Americans, in that sort of classic American way of ratcheting up things and just getting we're going to take it to, 11. Have created that new standard, and Australia doesn't have that standard. They're still searching for this sort of faux low barrier to entry sort of you can do it. Sure you can, but it's not going to be good. Yeah. I can shoot a TV show on my phone, but it's going to be shit.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I do think that if you just invest a bit of money, and we've got some decent cameras, but I've heard of people using, there's a Zoom camera, specific camera for podcasting. It's about $250.
Really?
Yeah, we had Lewis Spears on here. He's a comedian. He was speaking about how he uses that.
He is tall as well.
He's so tall. He's nearly fucking 7 foot. And he uses a Zoom camera. So it's literally him sitting there on a couch. He's got his lighting like this. Which my other light has gone out now. And he literally just sets it up right, so he captures everything, and then he breaks it down into many different things.
Wow.
And it's the only way to do it. And I think that, that question was from Mark from, he runs the Climactic podcast. So it's a podcast about climate change, and the tricky thing for him will be that they're almost like a collective. Like they've got people recording interviews from all over Australia. So it's sort of like a brand, like the ABC in a way, different reporters.
Yeah.
So the more that they could do around capturing that stuff, the better, I'd say.
I'd say invest in a transcription service.
Yeah.
If you, but I mean, it is at the same time, like, go to that sort of side of the whole thing, like capture all your content. But the other thing is it doesn't work for everybody. So, I mean, knowing what opportunities there are to do with the medium is probably more valuable than just doing them for the sake of them.
Yeah.
And being able to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get a little bit rambly with the like branded podcast stuff because I see it happen so much.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, it's this. I completely agree. And
like so much money just wasted.
Yeah.
We see like value, like 10% here, 20% there, just disappears off into like fees or whatever. And then the actual like $100,000 that's been put up, to make the thing, only like, $25,000 is spent on the actual production. Like there's $75,000 worth of value just like
right here
dissipated into the market, like through people knowing other people and just handing things on.
I wanted, because that was a really good point. I wonder how much with the Australia stuff, it's just like a natural complacency in Australian culture. But I was thinking about through that as well, because the Placard Media thing, what happened with that? That merger went through, right?
Yeah, so we merged for a year, and now we've demerged.
Okay, so you have demerged. Because I was thinking like with Placard, there must have been data there around what the habits were of people through advertising, through wanting to work with podcasts, download numbers. There must have been stuff there that would have been quite intriguing to, again, give you that perspective on Australia versus the US. That's
data that I don't have because I'm so much more concentrated on the content
creative
side. Yeah. Andy, who runs Placard, he would have been much more across that. But what I do understand is that like the market isn't big enough for brands just to bother to go direct to a whole lot of smaller shows. So there's the value proposition of Placard. You come to us and then we deal with 1,000 shows. But if you're big enough to spend, say $50 on 1,000 shows, you've got enough of a chunk there that a media agency is going to go, great, just spend that $50,000 with us. We'll just do it for you. And you don't have to muck around or anything with that. Like, it's just done. Just pay the money. And so having entrenched players that, sit at a trade desk all day and, like very experienced advertising and media buying, arguably conglomerates existing in the Australian marketplace, you can just channel your money through there because you've probably already got an advertising agency that works with a media buyer that says, we'll just do this for you.
And you've got an account manager, so you can just go, well, all right, this is the thing we want to do, sort it out, like make my problem go away.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll give you a beautiful report at the end of it probably. And you'll have known Luke for years or whatever. Yeah.
You know that his mum's just been out of hospital and, you're sort of semi-attached to his personal chit-chat that you get every month when you get your monthly update.
Totally. You might have even brought him over from the last company you worked at as a brand manager or something. Like,
exactly.
I can see why it works in America because the market is so much bigger. There's an availability for somebody to be.
There's room for indies.
Yeah. But even in by our standard, Gimlet would be an indie for a long time.
Yeah.
If Gimlet operated in the marketplace, it would be like a larger player, but it certainly wouldn't be equivalent to a Nova or something like that. If I think Gimlet gets about 14 million downloads a month, and out of a market that might have 250 million reach.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that, like the 5% of the marketplace? So in Australia, that would be 1.4 million a month.
Yeah.
Which I think Mamma Mia might do.
Right.
So that would be the equivalent. But Mamma Mia, they're not just a podcasting company. They have a whole lot of other things that help drive audiences to their podcasts or are able to cross-promote their podcasts.
Yeah, it's a media brand.
Yeah. Whereas, Gimlet is a media brand now, but it wasn't
Specialty
beforehand.
brand.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's weird that, hey. It just goes to show the size of that market.
Mm.
You mentioned before about being more focused on creative with Placard. I know one of the questions we had on that group was from Dan, who works at Content Grasshopper. Did my research on him.
Yep.
Going back and having a look. He was keen to get an understanding of what are some of the commonalities in making good content. And you guys have made some pretty decent podcasts. And I know the tough thing to say is, just good content. But you can obviously see, like you've been told someone's made a podcast, an associate or whatever. You have a look at it and you look at it and you go, oh, this is fucking shit. Like, what are the sort of things on a checklist that need to be aligned? Like, is it a good piece of, artwork for the podcast, a good intro song, a good setup, a good idea? What are some of the things that you always like to check off on your list?
So artwork, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to, it might cost you $400. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's there forever. You own it. You can do whatever you want with it afterwards. It's fantastic. A song, you don't have to pay more than $100 for a song that you'll own. Somebody else might have it somewhere in the world, but you'll be able to use it, remix it, whatever. Premiumbeat.com, easy, done.
Yeah.
In terms of the content, one thing that I when I talk to brands or when I think about shows that we might want to start is how would somebody who listens to our show that likes it, how would they describe it to their friend? So what is that interaction going to be when somebody says, you should listen to I heard this new podcast the other day, you should listen to it. Why should I listen to it? Oh, they do this, or because this. And so like using Chapter 1, this new show that we've got at the moment as an example, because I can hear the first chapter of new books on a podcast every week. Or Dave O'Neill. It's Dave O'Neill, Australian loved comedian, giving comedians a lift home in his car, and they talk about the gig. These very simple, I'd say value proposition sort of things where you're arming, I was sort of trying to say that we want to arm the audience to be the promoter. So, but how are we going to arm them? Well, we're going to not give them shit artwork to hold in front of their friend's face. We're going to give them, something sort of familiar so that builds attachment in like a decent theme tune.
I like this analogy. This is good.
We try and do things like, make sure that we think about what's the one thing out of the episode that somebody's going to go like, hey, I heard this podcast the other day. I heard this episode of, maybe Halliday Wine Companion. This happened. Somebody lost their wholesaler because their, windows were facing north. And if you can tease out those things, and I can never properly pin it down because it's always different. It's very different between individuals. But if you can at least arm people to help them become, a promoter of your work or something that you're working on, then you've got a much better chance of people saying, oh, this is a really good thing. Because they might not see how all of the elements break down in terms of, start, middle, end, make sure you tell a story, give specific information, have great artwork, include a theme tune, use quality equipment, give them a reasonable, and simplistic, but, clear and valuable proposition of what the show is or what the episode is.
Yeah.
At least they feel good about it and confident with the content to be able to not recommend it knowing they're not going to look like a dick to whoever they're talking to at a cafe or at a dinner party or something like that.
So arm them to become marketers in a way for you.
Yeah. And then, just try and meet them where, everywhere you can. So like, on Facebook or Twitter or, that sort of thing. I mean, the marketing side of podcasts, I still feel like I have no fucking idea. Like the deeper I get into it, the more out of my depth I feel. I'm not building some sort of like special speedboat to get me around the deep end of podcasting. I'm feeling completely sort of like I'm having trouble treading water when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, it is tough. It is tough because there's so much of it out there.
Yeah.
You got the fucking audiograms, and you have it on YouTube and all that.
Audiograms are so time consuming. I've tried to do them and you're just like, that's why I mentioned earlier, to get somebody who's a gun to do content, like repurposing content, would be so valuable. There'd be a half decent business idea in having like just a room full of 22-year-olds just taking in content and just smashing it out again in different formats, because I'd pay for that. You're like, you're going to make like 10 audiograms for $150? Like, done. And you're going to schedule them too? Done.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We actually do that right now. That's what we're trying to build. But to get it down to that price is going to take a lot of capital. The trickiest part with all that is process.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, is having a uniform process and having it in a way that the process doesn't require humans to be involved unless they're creating. And that's the hardest part, because so much of our time now is involved in not so much production, but just organizing shit. And so as we continue to build this, like right now on the side, you can go on there and select, okay, so I want this video, I want these formats, I want it distributed here from you guys. We've got a brand guide, this is what we're trying to do. It's all there, and then here's your price, bang, bang, it's done. But we don't have a section where you can actually manage the job. Communication is still done over Slack. It still requires me to really go through the brief with people. We need a way for people to be able to, select that themselves.
Yeah.
We've had projects where people just come to us and be like, yeah, we've got a library of like 10 hours of video. Can you like come up with a few video ideas? It's like, yeah, sure. It's just like a free license to print money, basically. But yeah, that's part of the course, I guess, in creating a business. It's tough. It's a very tough thing to do.
Oh, totally. Is it, what sort of video was this? 10 hours of video that you might have to watch?
It was like it wasn't a 10-hour video. It's just they had a library of videos. So it's like a chamber of commerce for, 2 countries that joined chamber of commerce, and they had like events where like the prime minister's talking or the treasurer or something like that. And so, we approached them and they got all this great stuff, but the post-production quality is not great. And I'm just looking at this original video because I'm actually a member of the chamber, and I'm like, Jesus, they've had the fucking prime minister there. They've had this person there, this foreign dignitary. What are you doing with this stuff? It's just sitting on this, like repository, and no one's doing shit with it. It's just free content, basically. What do you think the future holds for you? What is the next 2 years? You've passed that sort of 2.5, 3 year cycle of starting off in the business. It's still going, so you're surviving. What does the next 2 to 3 years look like?
I don't know. More like I'd really like to have more steady branded work that's more high value. So, greater revenue, longer projects, that sort of thing. I don't think the Australian market has much of a tolerance for that at the moment, besides a few bigger brands that might dip their toe in the water and then see what it's like and then, get out of it. I would like to make sure that we have, have a couple of owned shows that get, that grow to a bigger part where we have brand integration with them. That said, like I'm a little bit unsure. As you said, the 2 to 3 years, almost in that sort of transformational sort of point where I get itchy feet, every now and again. I mean, I saw ABC through for 8 or 9 years. I've Inflatable Regatta, since it's been public, has been, or like as a public event, has been since 2015. So we'll do what'll be the fourth event in 2020. And I don't have plans to let that go, particularly soon. Do it with a couple of friends, which is fun. And then Nearly, which is sort of getting older and more well-known. It really depends on my ability to activate the networks and the skills that I've grown over those 2 years, which are much more specific in, that context. And I think it's going to be a pretty... I think I'll be able to find a sort of a quick way to realize in 2019 whether or not Nearly's like going to be the breadwinner, or, I put it off to the side and keep it as a hobby and then try something else. That said, Nearly as a network or as a company even has been around, like a reasonably long 2 years, coming
time.
on 3 years isn't a short time, in
For the
Australian
industry.
podcasting land.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can always say, there's always somebody that says, I had a podcast back in 2006. And you're like, yeah, but,
It's a different era.
yeah, exactly. Oh, it's the second golden age of audio or something. I think if we can stick around long enough, and we might do some brand repositioning, just, so that there's less focus on the network, or maybe, some sort of more visible split, because, even now the website's quite heavy on the network. That way we can, capture a bit more of the corporate stuff, being around, having longer term relationships. One thing I'd love to do, if we could get into it, is to start getting into people's archives. So get into the ABC archives, maybe Channel 7, Channel 9, the Australian, Trove for the National Library, get stuck into those and do some really sort of some really evergreen audio production of biographical stuff or historical stuff that creates, a sort of a body of work that Australia has that, I don't want to say Ken Burns documentaries, but
It's pretty good though.
That'd be great being able to make something like that. But to do more things around that aren't, just let's go and, watch Married at First Sight and talk about it like that. But, getting more out of the medium where, we've got all these, like the Prime Minister, visiting in the records that you saw, or the videos that you saw. There's plenty of those around that Australia has.
Just untapped.
Yeah, they're untapped. Doing something like that where you could, really elevate, or resurface a lot of that audio. Even... Slow burn is a great example.
Okay.
Being able to re-investigate or re-prosecute, I know it's really time-consuming, but there's an opportunity to do that. I'm not saying that we should do the Whitlam dismissal again, but other events in Australia's history that we have, just by geography, close access or, relatively easy access to compared to other people, and the ability to to tell those stories. But, I wouldn't mind if Nearly diversified a little bit more into something that was a bit more content-based, so that we had, was it more of a media company rather than a podcast company.
Yeah.
That said, it's a tough thing to do with, finite resources.
Yeah, it's always very, very hard when you're just constricted by the time that you're doing for even your clients' work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things that I think the industry is sort of working itself out. We're still another few years away before I think things really solidify here. And I'd be intrigued to see whether it does transform into that idea of a media company and doing other things.
Well, given enough time, business models that are, more profitable or, maybe even more competitive, or, a better fit to the people that are getting, the service, should present themselves. Because America's working hard on it, but Australia will have to too if it wants to have, a podcast industry that's not just radio or like the radio networks or ABC
Niche.
repurposing, or just sort of like doing passion projects on the side, like to make something that's actually, separate. And you need that diversity in media anyway. So, whether or not we're contributing a hell of a lot, at least we're contributing to the landscape that makes it, a little bit more diverse. One thing, I always knew that we couldn't just do one thing to keep us going. So this year we're going to launch the Melbourne Podcast Festival so that we could have, people and audiences and podcasts presenting live, and sort of hopefully break the seal on the live podcast scene in Australia, because for Americans and British podcasts, it's a huge source of income for them to do their shows live.
It's massive. It's almost one of the primary revenue sources outside of merch. But yeah, live events is a big thing. I've been getting asked about that recently. A few random live events coming about. Even podcast hosts being asked to panel events, to host a panel in some way.
Yeah.
I've had that a few times now.
They're probably great panelists or great hosts because they, talk, they're experienced.
For a living, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was working on the Sunday show with Libby Gore in 2012, and we had this segment where a Year 12 teacher would come in, Year 12 English teacher, and talk about the English curriculum, and like things that they had to do, because Year 12 English is a big deal for kids. And so the premise was that the parents were listening, so the parents would hear this or get their kids to listen to the radio, and then they could, learn something from the teacher. And it dawned on me, like, fuck, the teachers are really good at speaking on the radio. Like, they come on and they just kill it. And like, of course they do. They're public speakers by profession.
Yeah.
And it's the same with podcasters, hosting. If you're a good presenter, like, you should be able to get on stage provided you're not too nervous and do the same job.
Yeah, and even then, once you get over those nerves, you're generally fine, because your job is to be a conversationalist.
Totally.
I'm realizing we're well and truly clocking over time.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's not your fault. It's all the joy of coming on the show. We need to finish off with some short, fast questions.
Sure.
So, quick answers. What is your morning routine?
Cat jumps on me, jumps on my wife. I get up and feed the cat. My wife goes to the shower, and we're both out the door by 7 a.m.
Okay, it's an early start.
Yep. I often come back to the house and then work until 8, and then
so
go to work.
Do you go to gym at 7?
No.
Okay. What about your evening routine? What does that look like?
It oscillates between, in the summer, it's sitting out the back, mucking around on my laptop until about 9:30.
Okay.
And then going to bed, sort of trying to switch off, or being at home or out for dinner until 8 or 9 o'clock, and then early night. Okay. My wife's bed alarm goes off at 9:35, and there's not much. I don't have much hope staying up after that. She's like, "Come to bed now." Okay, and I go to bed and fall asleep because she has to get up at 6:30 in the morning.
Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. If you could recommend a book to the audience, something that you'd probably gift them for Christmas, what would it be, and why?
Oh, shit! What have I read lately? I noticed that you've got the Elon Musk book over there by Ashley Vance. That was one I've read recently. If you don't think Elon Musk is a dickhead, it is a pretty great read. Ashley has done a fantastic job.
It's a great book. He's a good author, that Ashley Vance guy.
Yeah.
He's also
really
Aussie,
good.
but sounds American.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know he was Aussie.
Yeah, he runs a Bloomberg series called Hello World. He's really, really good like that. But the Elon Musk thing, I watched that Elon Musk interview with Joe Rogan. I just thought, geez, this guy's... he's on another plane, man. He's just sort of...
Yeah, totally.
You can tell he's definitely on the spectrum, that's for sure.
Yep. Probably on several spectrums. Depending where he wants to be.
Yeah. If you could have a billboard anywhere in Australia, where would it be, first of all? And then second of all, what would it say?
Straight down the Eureka Tower facing into the city would be good.
It's a good spot.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to go anywhere, I might as well go exposure.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of we're not that different, or we're not that larrikin, or something like that. There's this idea that I have about the falsehood of Australian larrikinism, that, you know, we're actually really quite conforming. So, like, if people will tell each other off at the football these days because they're not conforming, and the turncoats in, like, you know, at the cricket, when we'll go, you know, like, cheer you on because you're, like, you know, you're stepping out of line, and then as soon as the police grab you, they'll twist around and start yelling, "You're going home in the back of a divvy van." And for me, that is just fucking bizarre. You know,
it is a weird culture, isn't it? I heard recently about this event called the Battle of Brisbane. People should look this up on YouTube. The Battle of Brisbane by the History Guy. It's a guy who has a history channel that does random events that no one knows about. And it was basically an event that was created because these Australians were arguing with a GI, like an American soldier in Brisbane. And, you know, like, why the fuck do you get this and we don't get that, and blah, blah. 2 US MPs came over, so military police. They started to crack the shits to the military police because they were picking on the soldier all of a sudden. And so they started beating up the military police. And what happened was a riot that went for a day with 2,000 people, because there was angst about these Americans getting special treatment and all this other crap that had evolved. And one Australian soldier was killed from a military policeman.
Wow.
Shotgun shot to the chest. And it's like everything went back to normal the day later. Like, the same soldiers would ask the American GIs, like, "Oh, what did you think of that brawl yesterday?" Like, it is a weird culture that we have here, but also, like, you know, when you watch things like Brown Cardigan, you just can't help but laugh.
Yeah. There's one thing I can't figure out is how smart I'm supposed to be in this culture. Like, I stepped out onto the road in front of a cyclist. You bloody fucking idiot. And, like, all right, mate. Like, you know, it's not the smartest thing in the world, but then you say something. He's like, "Oh, look at this guy. Uses a big word like castigate." Give me a fucking break.
It is bizarre. Look, Courtney, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
You've got a busy day, I know, jumping between sites, recording with people. I
embellish that.
I'm going to just say that that's the case.
All right, I'll take it.
You've got Chapter 1, which has just come out with Nearly Media. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
So, me personally, my Instagram is Quarters, Qatas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter as C Carthy, so CCARTHY. My Facebook I keep pretty private, but I think you can follow my public posts if I make one. Nearly Media, search on all the podcast apps.
Yeah,
and
Google it.
Yeah, Google it. You'll get it. Nearly.com.au.
My personal favourite one, I haven't checked out Chapter 1 yet, but I will after you spoke about that. It's a good idea. I really like this idea of reading the first chapter of a book to get a sense of it. But the one with Glenn Robbins and Dave O'Neill is my favourite.
Somehow related.
It's a great show.
Somebody described it as slow podcasting because they're both sort of 50 or 60 and they take their time, but each episode's only 20 minutes. And there's a third guest or third host, which is the computer called Sam.
Yeah.
Robot Lady.
Yeah. Like Mike Howell off fucking Tofop or whatever it is. Look, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for making it to the end. Before you run off, we need your help to grow this audience. Subscribe on your podcast app. Subscribing will give you priority access and help your fellow-minded listeners find Uncommon, or consider sharing this with a friend who you think would enjoy these sorts of episodes, and this will go a very, very long way in helping us build the audience. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and Twitter, or consider subscribing on YouTube as well. You just need to search for Neural, Neural, ALLE, or consider following us on Instagram as well by searching Uncommon, UNCOMMON. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.